Mom, nobody needs you anymore, Julian said, thumb flicking across his screen like a metronome for my heartbeat. For a second I thought I hadn't heard him right. The living room in his Tacoma townhouse smelled like cedar cleaner and last night's takeout. The blinds were half closed against a drizzle that turned the streetlights into soft halos. He didn't look up. I brought you the spare charger, I said, setting it on the counter beside a bowl of limes he'd never slice. And the mail you keep sending to my place. Thanks, he murmured, eyes still on the phone. But you don't need to do that. I'm good. Seriously, stop dropping by. You don't have to parent me. He paused, then added almost casually, nobody needs you like that anymore. The word nobody slid under my skin and found all the places I thought I'd healed. I swallowed. Is that what this is about? Me checking in? It's about space, he said, finally meeting my eyes. His were the same storm gray they'd been when he was a toddler, pressed to my chest, feverish and trusting. Now they were cool practice. I'm busy. I've got work. Friends. Nora's moving some of her things in. We've got it. The botanical tattooed barista with the ironic sweaters and opinions about olive oil. I liked her. Thought I did. I had you at 17, I said softly. We kind of raced each other. He huffed out a laugh that wasn't a laugh. Exactly. You don't have to keep proving you can do it. I'm grown. But free. Go do something fun. Go do something fun. As if I hadn't spent years choosing the shift nobody wanted, canceling dates, budgeting in a language of coupons and corners. As if the scar under my collarbone, white as chalk and shaped like a question mark, hadn't come from the night I drove us through ice to the year and prayed I'd made the right call. As if free were a door I'd just been too silly to open. I'm not trying to suffocate you, I said. Dropping off a charger isn't. Mom. He slid the charger back toward me with a fingertip. I can buy one. The countertop was a river of polished concrete. The charger cable caught in the small divot near the edge, the one a contractor had promised to fix and never did. I stared at the snag like it might translate the moment back into a language I spoke. Hey, I said. My voice sounded even, as if it belonged to someone who'd rehearsed this. If that's what you want. He softened barely. Don't take it personally. How else could I take it? The rain picked up, drumming the window in a rhythm I knew by heart. Tacoma rain, Pacific rain, the kind that lures you into thinking it's gentle until you're soaked to the bones. I looked around. The couch I'd helped him choose on clearance, the framed map of the Pacific Northwest I'd found at the antique fair, his college diploma propped against the wall because the frame I bought was too ornate. My fingerprints everywhere, invisible. I'll text you later, he said, already turning back to the screen. Sure. I picked up the charger, then set it down again. My hand didn't know which of us to listen to. On the way to the door, I paused by the little hook where he kept the spare key I'd given him when he lost his. A joke that day. Look who's responsible now. I felt the key's teeth through the metal, sharp and certain. Julian, I said, and he glanced up, impatient and beautiful. My son. My almost man who still left wet towels on doorknobs and believed cruelty could be tidy if you wrapped it in practical words. Yeah. I hear you. Good. Relief flickered over his face, like I'd finally solved a test he'd been waiting for me to pass. I opened the door. The hallway smelled like new paint and raincoats. Behind me, his phone chimed. He was already somewhere else. I slipped the spare key off the hook and closed my hand around it until the edges bit my palm. The sting cleared my head. Nobody needs you anymore. I stood in the stairwell listening to the rain and my own breath and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not rage, not collapse. Heat. A small, deliberate flame. Okay, I whispered, to the key, to the rain, to the thin air between the woman I'd been and the one I hadn't met yet. Then I put the key in my pocket and started down the stairs. The rain followed me home like an old song, clinging to my coat, soaking into the frayed cuffs of my jeans. By the time I reached my apartment, the world outside was washed in silver. I hung my coat on the crooked hook by the door and kicked off my shoes. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee grounds and lavender detergent, the only two luxuries I still allowed myself. Everything else was functional. Second-hand sofa with a sunken cushion, chip table with one stubborn leg, a refrigerator that rattled at night like it had a secret. I dropped my purse on the counter and stood in the middle of the room, staring at nothing. The silence was thick, the kind that presses against your ribs until you can hear your own heartbeat. I had thought raising Julian alone would mean that one day, when he was grown, independent, successful, I'd finally rest. Maybe he'd call, maybe he'd ask for advice, maybe he'd just want to share a meal where I wasn't also the one scrubbing dishes with raw hands. Instead, there was only this silence. His words replayed in my head like a stuck record. Nobody needs you anymore. I sank into the sofa, hugging one of the mismatched throw pillows to my chest. It smelled faintly of dust and last week's popcorn. My eyes drifted to the bookshelf by the window, where old novels leaned against photo albums. I pulled one down, the album with the cracked leather spine. The photos inside told a story Julian no longer cared to remember. His crooked baby teeth, the paper crown he wore at his 10th birthday party, the prom tuxedo I'd had to alter myself because we couldn't afford tailoring. His smile had been real then, unguarded, his eyes always seeking mine in a crowd. I traced one picture with my fingertip. Julian, age 5, wearing rain boots 2 sizes too big, grinning at a puddle like it held the universe. Back then he needed me for everything. Food, safety, comfort, a shield from the world's sharp edges. Now the world had him and I had nothing. The heat from earlier, that small flame, flickered again in my chest. I wasn't sure yet if it was anger or something else. All I knew was that I couldn't sit here forever, waiting for a call that might never come. I closed the album, the cover snapping shut like a decision. On the counter, my phone buzzed with a notification. Community Center grand opening. This Saturday. Cooking classes. Book clubs. Travel meetups. I stared at the glowing screen, the words blurring as though the choice was too bright to look at directly. Free, Julian had said. Free to do something fun. The word had sounded like an insult when it came from him. But sitting there in my quiet apartment, I wondered if maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was an invitation. I set the phone down, my pulse quickening. For the first time in years, I began to imagine a version of myself who wasn't just a mother. A version who might be needed by herself. Saturday arrived draped in gray clouds, the kind that threatened rain but never quite delivered. I almost used the weather as an excuse. Almost. The flyer on my phone screen glared at me like a dare. Community Center grand opening. Join us. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, debating whether I even belonged there. My reflection was too honest. Dark circles under my eyes, hair that still held the faint scent of yesterday's coffee shop shift. At 35, I looked less like a woman in her prime and more like someone life had already chewed on. But I put on the navy sweater I saved for special days, the one with a neckline that made me look like I had tried at least. I slipped into jeans that hadn't faded yet and swiped on a little lipstick. The shade was called Wild Rose. I had bought it on clearance and never worn it. As I locked the door to my apartment, a question whispered at the back of my mind. What if nobody talks to me? What if I don't fit in? But another voice, quieter yet stubborn, pushed back. And what if you do? The center was only a 10-minute walk, tucked between a florist and a shuttered diner on Maple Street. The building itself looked new, bright windows, banners snapping in the breeze. Balloons bobbed near the entrance and the sound of laughter spilled out before I even stepped inside. My chest tightened. For a second I considered turning around, melting back into the comfort of my couch, my solitude, my safety. Then someone held the door open. Come on in, a woman said with a warm smile. She was maybe in her 50s, wearing a scarf patterned with sunflowers. Her eyes were alive, kind, and curious. First time. I nodded, suddenly shy. Yeah. Just looking. You'll find something, she said. We all did. She handed me a folded pamphlet, pressing it gently into my palm. Name's Lorraine. If you need a tour, just holler. Inside, the center buzzed with life. A cooking demo at one end, a circle of people painting at easels on the other. A small group chatted animatedly in Italian, words I didn't recognize but somehow envied. A bulletin board overflowed with flyers. Writing workshop Tuesdays, travel group, Italy 2025, community garden sign UPS. My pulse quickened. It was too much, too new. But then I spotted a handwritten sign tacked to the bulletin board. Simple and unassuming. Writing group, Thursdays at 6. New members welcome. I reached out, running my finger along the edge of the paper. Something stirred deep inside me, something that felt suspiciously like hope. For years, my words had been swallowed. By work, by exhaustion, by the endless needs of motherhood. But maybe here they could breathe. Lorraine reappeared at my side, following my gaze. That's a good one, she said. You should join. I hesitated, the old doubts circling. What if I'm not good enough? What if they laugh? But the flame inside me flickered again, stronger this time. I think I will, I said, surprising even myself. And just like that, a door cracked open. The following Thursday, I stood outside the community center clutching a spiral notebook so tightly the wire rings dug crescents into my palm. Through the glass doors, I could see a small group gathered around a table, mugs of tea steaming in their hands, notebooks open like invitations. My feet wanted to run. My stomach twisted. I hadn't written anything in years, unless you counted grocery lists or passive-aggressive notes to Julian about leaving dishes in the sink back when he still lived at home. I almost turned away. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Julian. Can't talk. Busy. Maybe next week. No hello. No love you. Just efficient dismissal. The words lit that small flame inside me again, steady and defiant. Without overthinking, I pushed the door open. Come on in, Lorraine called, her sunflower scarf brighter than ever. She gestured toward the group. Everyone, this is Clara. First night. A handful of faces turned toward me. A man with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses smiled warmly. A younger woman with ink-stained fingers waved. They didn't look like judges waiting to pounce. They looked like people waiting for a story. I slid into a chair, setting my notebook on the table. The paper smelled faintly of fresh pulp, of beginnings. Any writing background? Lorraine asked, settling beside me. Not really, I admitted. Just thoughts. Here and there. That's all any of us have at first, the silver-haired man said. Thoughts are the seeds. The group went around sharing snippets of their work. Short poems, half-finished stories, essays about childhood summers and lost loves. When it was my turn, my throat tightened. I opened my notebook to the first page where shaky words sprawled across the paper. Nobody needs you anymore. It was all I had written. Just that one sentence, copied in heavy black ink as though writing it down might drain its poison. I cleared my throat. This is all I've got, I said. But it's real. Silence, then nods. Not pitying, not polite. Understanding. Sometimes the truest stories start with a wound, Lorraine said softly. I exhaled, tension draining from my shoulders. For the first time, the sentence didn't feel like a weight. It felt like a beginning. As the session went on, I scribbled furiously, words tumbling out faster than I could catch them. I wasn't just writing about Julian. I was writing about myself. The nights I stayed awake through double shifts. The afternoons I sat alone in cafeterias, too tired to eat. The dreams I buried so deep I almost forgot where. By the time the meeting ended, my notebook was alive with lines, messy and uneven but mine. Walking home under the drizzle, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. A pulse of purpose. Maybe nobody needed me. But I needed this. The next evening, I decided to call Julian. Part of me hoped he might notice the change in my voice, that small spark of energy I'd carried home from the writing group. Maybe he'd hear it and ask, "What's going on with you, Mom? You sound different." The phone rang twice before he answered, his tone clipped. "Hey, can this be quick? I'm in the middle of something." I forced a smile into my voice. "I won't keep you. I just wanted to check in. How are things with Nora? How's work?" He sighed like I'd already taken too much of his time. "Fine. Everything's fine. We're busy. That's why I asked you not to keep popping in, remember?" "I know," I said carefully. "I wasn't calling about errands. I just wanted to talk." A pause, then the faint clatter of a keyboard in the background. "Look, Mom, you don't need to worry. I'm good. I don't know. Find something for yourself. A hobby. Travel. Whatever." He meant it as dismissal, but the words rolled through me differently this time. They didn't sting the same way they had in his townhouse. Not after the writing group. Not after Lorraine's kind nod and the strangers who listened without judgment. "I actually did," I said softly. "What?" His tone sharpened, caught off guard. "I went to a writing group. Yesterday. It felt good." There was silence on the other end, long enough that I thought the line had dropped. Then he gave a short, humorless laugh. "Writing? Since when?" "Since yesterday," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Well," he muttered, "if it keeps you busy." The words landed cold, like a door shutting. "All right, Mom, I've got to run. Talk later, okay?" Before I could answer, the line went dead. I stared at the phone, listening to the quiet hum of my apartment. The old ache rose up again, but beneath it something else stirred, an ember refusing to go out. For years his voice had been my compass, my proof of worth. Tonight it was just noise. I set the phone down, opened my notebook and began to write. The following Thursday I walked into the community center again, clutching my notebook like it might slip away if I didn't hold on tight. But this time the fear had softened. I wasn't an intruder anymore. Lorraine waved me over. "Clara, we saved you a seat." I slid into the chair, warmth blooming in my chest at the sound of my name spoken with welcome, not obligation. The group was buzzing with energy. Someone had baked lemon bars, another had printed copies of their latest poem. There was laughter, the kind that rings in your ears afterward like music. When it was my turn, I read a few paragraphs I'd scribbled late the night Julian hung up on me. The words spilled out shaky but real, about silence in kitchens and the sound of rain filling the spaces conversations should. When I looked up, no one was smirking. No one was dismissive. They were leaning in, listening like my words mattered. "That line about rain," the silver-haired man said, tapping his pen on his notebook, "that stayed with me. It feels alive." Alive. I hadn't thought of myself that way in years. After the session, a younger woman with paint flecks still on her sweater touched my arm. "A few of us are grabbing coffee. Want to come?" I almost said no. Habit tugged at me to retreat home, to shrink back into my safe silence. But then I thought of Julian's sigh on the phone, the way he said if it keeps you busy, like my existence was an afterthought. "Yes," I said instead. We ended up at a little cafe on Alder Street, the kind with mismatched mugs and too many plants. I sat with people whose names I'd just learned, Lorraine with her sunflower scarf, Peter with the silver hair, and Maya with the paint-splattered sweater. We talked about books and travel, about the tiny things that make up a life. At one point Maya leaned in and asked, "So Clara, what do you do outside of writing?" For years the answer would have been automatic. "I'm Julian's mom." But the words caught in my throat now. "I'm figuring that out," I admitted with a small smile. And for the first time that answer didn't sound like a failure. It sounded like a beginning. A week later I was chopping vegetables in my small kitchen when my phone buzzed. Julian's name lit up the screen. For a moment my heart leapt. Old reflex. But the message was short, blunt. "Need you to drive out tomorrow. Nora's working, I can't. Can you help pick up the new dresser from the store?" I stared at the words, the knife paused midair. A year ago I would have said yes instantly. No hesitation. I'd have rearranged my entire day, borrowed a truck, lifted until my arms ached. Because that's what I'd always done. Filled in the blanks, fixed the mess, carried the weight. But tomorrow was Thursday. Writing night. My night. I typed back slowly, "I can't. I have plans." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then came back. Finally his reply landed. "Plans? What could be more important than helping your son?" My chest tightened, but not with guilt. With clarity. I wrote back, "It's important to me. You'll figure it out." The phone stayed silent for hours. When it finally buzzed again, it wasn't an apology. Just one line, "Fine. I'll ask someone else." I set the phone down, my hands trembling, not from shame but from something new. A boundary. That evening as I walked into the community center, Lorraine caught my expression immediately. "Tough day?" she asked. I nodded. "My son thinks I'm selfish for not dropping everything to help him." Lorraine's smile was gentle but steady. "Selfish is a word people use when you stop giving them more than you can afford." Her words settled into me like an anchor. For the rest of the night, I poured my heart into the page, the pen moving faster than my doubts. Across town, I imagined Julian scrolling his phone, irritated, Nora beside him, the dresser still sitting in its box. For once, his small storm wasn't mine to weather. 2 weeks later, Lorraine announced that our group would be holding a small showcase in the community center's multipurpose room. "Nothing fancy," she promised, waving a hand. "Just some cookies, maybe a pot of coffee. Everyone reads a piece aloud." The idea terrified me. Reading in front of strangers was one thing, but reading in front of a room, voices echoing, eyes fixed on me, was another. I almost backed out. But when Thursday came, I found myself standing at the edge of that room, clutching my notebook. Folding chairs were lined up in neat rows, a dozen people chatting quietly, the smell of oatmeal cookies wafting from the back table. "Clara," Lorraine said, her sunflower scarf as bright as ever. "You're on the list." Ready? My mouth was dry, my palms damp. Not really. He gave me a knowing look. That's how you know it matters. When my name was called, I walked to the front, legs shaky, notebook trembling in my hands. I opened to the page I'd written after Julian's last text, the one where I told him you'll figure it out. The words spilled from my lips, halting at first, then stronger. About years of bending, of breaking, of being useful but unseen. About what it felt like to finally say no. When I finished, the room was quiet for a heartbeat too long. Then came the sound, applause, not polite but full, insistent, like waves against shore. I blinked, startled. A woman in the front row dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. The silver-haired man leaned forward. That, he said, was truth. Heat rushed to my face, but it wasn't embarrassment. It was something richer, deeper. Pride. As I returned to my seat, Maya reached over and squeezed my hand. "You're a writer," she whispered. And for the first time I believed her. That night, walking home under a sky clear enough to reveal a scatter of stars, I felt taller, lighter. The city lights didn't seem so harsh. The streets didn't feel so empty. For once, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't unnecessary. I was Clara. And Clara had a voice. The following Sunday, Julian called. No text this time, an actual call. I almost didn't pick up, half expecting another list of things he needed me to do. But curiosity got the better of me. "Hey," I said cautiously. "Mom." His tone was sharper than usual, like he'd rehearsed being annoyed. "Why didn't you tell me you've been going to some group? Nora ran into someone at the cafe who mentioned you read something at the community center." I gripped the phone tighter. "It's just a writing group. Nothing dramatic." "You stood up and read about me," he snapped. "About us. Don't you think that's a little unfair?" The old reflex tugged at me, apologize, shrink, smooth it over. But the flame inside me didn't flicker this time. It held steady. "I wrote about my life," I said. "My experiences. That includes being your mother, yes. But it wasn't about embarrassing you." "Well, it felt like it," he shot back. "What are you trying to prove? That I'm some terrible son?" I took a breath, steady and deep. "I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm trying to find myself again. That's not against you, Julian. It's for me." There was silence on the line, brittle as glass. Then he scoffed. "So what, you're a writer now? You think you're going to, publish a book?" "Maybe," I said, surprising even myself with how calm the word sounded. "Why not?" His voice cracked with frustration. "Because you're supposed to be," he stopped short, then muttered, "you're supposed to be my mom. Not this." The sting was still there, but softer now. "I am your mom," I said quietly. "But I'm also Clara. And you might have to get used to both." Before he could answer, I ended the call. My hand trembled, but not from fear. From power. I sat in the quiet of my apartment, notebook open on the table, and wrote down the words I hadn't spoken aloud. He doesn't recognize me anymore. Maybe that's because, finally, I do. A week later, after another writing session that left my notebook brimming with half-finished stories, Lorraine pulled me aside. "You ever traveled, Clara?" she asked, her scarf today a swirl of deep blues and greens. "Not really," I admitted. "Unless you count a road trip to Boise when Julian was 13. He hated every second of it." She chuckled. "Well, our travel group is planning a spring trip to Italy. Just a handful of us. Florence, Rome, maybe Venice if the budget stretches. You should come." The suggestion hit me like a gust of wind. Thrilling, terrifying, impossible. Italy? Me? Why not you? Lorraine's eyes crinkled with mischief. "You've got stories in you. Maybe you'll find more there." That night, back in my apartment, I pulled out my laptop and typed Florence, Italy into the search bar. Pictures bloomed on the screen. Sunlight spilling across red-tiled rooftops, narrow streets alive with scooters, cathedrals carved like lace. For a moment, I let myself imagine it. Sitting at a cafe with my notebook, ordering wine without apologizing, standing in front of the Duomo with nobody to rush me along. Then reality tugged hard. Rent. Work. Money always stretched too thin. And Julian, how would he react if I told him? As if on cue, my phone buzzed. A text from him. "Haven't heard from you all week. Everything okay?" Not a demand. Not an errand. Just a question. But my chest tightened all the same. I typed back, "I'm fine. Just busy." 3 dots appeared, then vanished. No reply followed. I shut the phone off, turned back to the glowing screen, and whispered the thought I was almost afraid to say out loud. Maybe it's time I went somewhere just for me. 2 days later, Julian called again. Not a rushed text, not a clipped message, an actual call. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Mom," he said quickly, almost too quickly, "are you free this weekend? Nora and I are hosting some people and, well, you should come. Dinner, drinks, casual." The words landed strange in my ear. For months he'd brushed me aside, but now suddenly there was an invitation? "I thought you said I didn't really fit into your life anymore," I replied, careful, steady. He exhaled, the sound sharp. "That's not what I meant. I don't know. Things are changing. You've been distant. As if I hadn't been standing right here all these years, invisible, waiting for scraps of attention. "I've been busy," I said softly. "With what?" His tone sharpened, a demand wrapped in curiosity. I let the silence stretch a little, long enough for the weight of it to press against him. "With me," I finally answered. He scoffed. "What does that even mean? Writing groups? Random hobbies? That's not who you are." A flicker of anger rose in me, hot and clear. "And who am I, Julian?" He faltered. "You're my mom." "Yes," I said, my voice calm but firm. "But I'm also Clara. And Clara deserves more than being summoned when you need furniture moved or food on the table." Another silence, heavier this time. I imagined him pacing in that polished townhouse, frustration written across his face. "Just come to dinner," he muttered finally. "Please." The word please caught me off guard. He hadn't used it in years. "I'll think about it," I said. Not yes. Not no. Just enough to let him sit with the truth. He no longer dictated my time. When I hung up, I felt the tremor in my hands, but it wasn't fear. It was power, raw and unfamiliar. Across the room, my notebook waited, open to a half-finished story about a woman who chose herself after decades of being told she didn't matter. I picked up the pen and kept writing. Saturday night came, and with it Julian's dinner. I dressed slowly, staring at the invitation in my mind like a coin flipping through the air. He wanted me there, but not because he'd suddenly seen me. He wanted the version of me he could control. The dependable mother, the silent extra. At 6 o'clock, instead of heading toward his townhouse, I walked to Alder Street, to the little cafe with mismatched mugs and too many plants. Lorraine and Maya were already there, laughing over a plate of biscotti. They waved me over like I belonged, no questions asked. "Thought you might chicken out," Maya teased as I slid into the seat. "Not tonight," I said. And for once I meant it. Later, back in my apartment, my phone buzzed with messages. "Where are you? Guests are asking." "Then you're embarrassing me." And finally, a quieter one. "Mom, why are you doing this?" I let the phone rest face down on the table, the glow of the screen fading into nothing. My notebook lay open beside it, waiting. I wrote, "For years I was needed but unseen. Now I am seen, even if only by myself. And that is enough." The pen moved easily, the words flowing without hesitation. By the time I closed the notebook, the night was quiet. I stood by the window, looking out at the street lamps glowing against the damp Tacoma pavement, and felt a steadiness in my chest I hadn't known in years. Julian would call again, I was sure. Maybe one day he'd understand. Maybe he wouldn't. But his recognition was no longer the measure of my worth. I was Clara. Mother, yes. But also writer, traveler to be, friend, woman. And for the first time I was enough for me.